What is going on, everybody? So welcome back to another episode of my QRP head-to-head series. So last time we looked at the LNR Precision Mountain Topper MTR-4B versus the Venus Tech SW-3B. And while they were both fantastic radios, at the end of the day, I felt that the MTR-4B was just a little bit better radio overall. So that won the shootout for last time. So today, we're going to put the MTR-4B up against its next competition. Now, this competition is going to be a little bit weird because the radio that we're going to compare it to is its little brother, the LNR Precision MTR-3B LCD. Now, there are two versions of this radio. There's one with the LCD, and then there's one with like a 1 or 2 digit little LED display. The LCD display one that I have here in my hand is a little more sought after. They're hard to get. They are very expensive. So we're gonna talk about these two radios today, and we're gonna do the exact same thing. Now, I'm not gonna go back through every feature of this radio because we've already seen them. And to be perfectly honest with you, this is gonna be a pretty short video because this radio and this radio are very, very similar, but there are a few differences that make one better than the other for certain things. This is going to be a very hard decision, and I'm not sure which way I'm going to go yet. All right, so let's look at the specs, and then we'll get to the radios. So, our LNR Precision MTR-4B, as we talked about last time, it's about $370. They become available about once a month. All right, so they're available on the 1st of every month. They make 25 available for order, and once those 25 are gone, they're gone for the month. They're first come, first serve. So if you want one, you got to be early in the month. Usually that first day of the month, they all get sold out. There might be a few left the second day. Again, just to reiterate our size, it's 5.15 inches by 3 inches by 1.075 inches. It weighs 7.95 ounces. The power output is about 5 watts. It's 80, 40, 30, and 20, and it is CW only. Now, the LNR Precision MTR-3B price, good luck. Like I said, got a spare kidney. These things are obscenely expensive when they come up for sale. I'm not even going to say what I paid for that one. They're very hard to get, okay? So if you want a 3B, plan on waiting for a while and plan on spending some money on it. It's going to cost substantially more than a 4-band radio will, all right? There are some reasons why that is super sought after. We'll talk about them in a minute. But it's only 3.85 inches by 2.5 inches by 0.9 inches. This radio is tiny, right? It's about the size of a deck of cards. It only weighs 4.8 ounces, so it's like 2/3, not even, of the other radio. It's 40, 30, 20, just like the SW-3B was. Realistically, who cares about 80? Like I said, there may be people out there that use 80 for activations in the field, but man, an 80 meter antenna is awfully big. And again, it is CW only, okay? So when we looked at the MTR-4B last time, we looked at some of its features, some of its benefits, some of its drawbacks, right? I talked about some of the things that I liked about this radio, things like the direct frequency entry, things like having a clock, having an SWR meter and a power meter, multiple CW memories, all of those kind of things that I really liked about this radio. Some of those things are included in this radio as well, but some of them are not. Now, understand, this is an older radio, right? These are no longer made. Now, there are rumors out there. I've seen some things from one of the guys who works for LNR. He posted something about asking people if they'd be interested in a new version of this radio that was 40/20/15. Now, that particular set of bands I'd be really interested in. But this radio right here is 40/30/20. Same basic feature set. We've still got multiple CW memories. We still have direct frequency entry. We still have a clock. What we lose on this radio, so let me go ahead and fire this thing up. So this, I'm actually going to power off a 9-volt battery. All right, these are very voltage sensitive. This is much more voltage sensitive than this is. You really need to be careful with these little 3Bs. All right, these things, I run this off of either a 9-volt battery or, actually, let me grab it. I've got, behind me, I have my little pack that goes with this radio. I also have a drone battery. All right, this is a 650 milliamp hour, 11.1 volt lithium ion battery that I run this thing off of. You can run this thing for hours on this little tiny battery. Or, one thing I really like to use is this. I should have grabbed these before I started filming, but this is a USB PD power bank. This is a 10,000 milliamp hour power delivery power bank. And then I've got a 12 volt trigger cable. All right, so I can use this to charge my phone. I can use it to run the throwing things in the ground. I can use it to run the radio. Right, I can do all sorts of different things with this little power bank. So these are nice because this is multi-purpose, but like I said, this will give this radio an exact 12 volts, okay? I really like to run this radio on 12 volts or less. I could get away with running one of those talent cells because they're right about exactly 12 volts also, but I generally run one of those 3 battery setups. I either run that USB PD power bank, this little 9-volt adapter. Inside here is just a rechargeable, all right, lithium ion 9-volt battery, or I will run it on the drone battery. This drone battery is tiny, it's very light, and this thing will go for a long time. This is sort of the battery I probably run most of the time on it. But today I'm just going to fire it up with this little 9-volt battery. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I am going to hook up a dummy load. I'm not going to hook this up to an antenna. We're going to hook up a key. We are going to hook up a speaker. And we are going to hook up our power, theoretically. We'll go ahead and turn this radio on. And you will see that this looks very, very similar to what you saw on the 4-band radio. And if you listen, you're going to hear that same obnoxious RFI that I had out of this radio, right? If you remember back to my last video, this 4-band mountain topper was pretty noisy, right? This 3-bander is just as bad, okay? So you can see we've got, let me turn that down so you're not listening to that obnoxious clicking. You can see we've got our frequency here, so we're currently on 20 meters, all right? You can see our key speed's currently set to 20. Our time is currently 21:48, and we're currently running exactly 9 volts, all right? So, bring this down just a little bit so we're a little closer to this. So this radio is very, very similar, okay? And so we've got, turn that up a little. These are both, all these radios we've looked at so far are pin diode switching. There's no relays to click, so. So, very similar radio to the 4B, okay? We've got our memories just like we did before, so I can hit memory. And we have programmable CW memories, just like the 4B. Now, one thing you'll notice that is missing from this radio is I can put it in straight key mode, but it does not give me power output or SWR. This radio does not have an SWR meter on it, and it does not have a power meter on it. Okay, so that is a win for the MTR-4B. Okay. Again, changing bands on this radio is just like changing bands on the 4B. You move your little switches, right? And it announces it via CW, what band you're moving to. Right, so now we're on 30 meters. Other than that, this radio is identical to that MTR-4B. Now, let me shut this thing off, unhook all this stuff, and let me talk a little bit about some of the good things about this radio and some of the bad things about this radio. And then we're going to have to do a little thinking about which one of these radios is going to win this. Because like I said, this is not an easy decision to make, because both of these radios have some serious strengths and some serious weaknesses, but they're also very, very similar, right? I mean, they're both LNR precision mountain toppers. They're both multi-band radios. They have very similar feature sets. Let's start with some of the things that I like about this radio over this radio. All right. This is a newer radio. The receiver is a little better. It does sound a little better. Okay. It does include more bands. Now, again, 80, it is what it is. This has got an SWR meter. It's got a power meter. It has all of those things that the other radio lacks. Okay. So in that aspect, this is a better radio. This radio will also handle a wider voltage range, right? I don't have to be quite as psycho as I do with this thing. This thing is very, very delicate. This one is not, it's still delicate, but it's not as delicate, okay? Other than that, these radios are very, very similar. Now let's talk about what I like about this radio over this radio. And you can probably figure it out without me even having to say anything. Which one of those do you want to carry into the field? It's smaller in every single dimension, and it weighs about half as much. Okay? This thing's about 8 ounces. This thing's 4 and change ounces. Look at the difference in size between these two radios. I mean, right, if you're going into the field or you're going to do a summit, that's kind of a no-brainer. Like, why would I want to bring this radio when I can carry this little bitty thing? This is smaller than the SW3B. It's lighter than the SW3B, but it runs the same bands as the SW3B, and it's got a real-time clock. It's got the direct frequency entry from this radio. It's got all of those features. Really, the only thing this lacks from this is 80 meters and the SWR meter and the power meter. Okay, it's got all the programmable memories. It's got all of those things. The finish on this radio is phenomenal. It's a rough powder coat, and it is tough as nails. This radio is not particularly new, and it looks pretty much brand new. Okay? The finish on this radio is substantially better than the finish on this radio, if that's important to you. Now, good luck getting these. Like I said, these are very, very hard to find, and when you find them, they go really fast, and they go for way more money than they should. All right, plan on spending. If you can find one on the cheap, it's probably going to be $500. I've seen them go as high as $750. All right, for these little bitty 3-band radios, which is insanity. But it's sought after because it is so small. And because it runs probably the 3 most common bands most of your CW QRP ops are going to run, 40, 30, 20. Those are probably your bread and butter bands, unless you're working DX, right? So if I'm trying to work summit to summit DX, this probably isn't the best radio. 20 will do it. 30 and 40 probably, they might at night. They certainly aren't during the day. But domestically, this is my most common band stack is 40, 30, 20. Those are the 3 that I use the most. Probably in this order, 40, 20, 30, okay? From there, if I was given a choice, I'd have a radio that had 15 and 10 in it also. 17 and 12, I mean, I'll use them. 12 sometimes is kind of interesting. I don't use 17 a ton. It's very similar to 20, so I really, unless there's a crazy contest going on and I'm looking for some open band space, generally I don't use 17 much. So this band set right here, 40, 30, 20, is kind of my sweet spot for a QRP radio. And the size of this thing just makes it so compelling, right? The problem with this radio is you can't get them. And when you find them, they go super fast and they are so expensive. This radio, you can still get. They're not super easy to get, but they're definitely not unobtainable like this thing is. This thing is made out of unobtainium. It is just your good luck finding these things. These, go on the LNR site, first of the month, be one of the first 25 people to order it. You got yourself a radio. All right. So now comes the hard part. And this is going to boil down to my operating style. Now, this might be different for somebody else. But for me, if I had to pick only one of these radios to keep, oh Lord, this is going to be hard. I really like the SWR and power meter on this. But this is so small that no matter the fact that this has a little bit better receiver in it and it's got those features that I really like. Oh, I don't really want to do that, but at the end of the day, I think I'm going to have to go with the MTR-3B. It's so small. It's, like I said, it's about the size of a deck of cards. All right, so here, to give you an idea, I'll show you the scale. So this is a Pixel 8 Pro. Okay, you can see how much smaller this radio is than my phone. It's insane how small this radio is, and it doesn't show up good on camera. When you hold this thing in real life, you're like, is this really this small? When I got this radio, I knew it was small. When I got it and I took it out of the box, I went, like, where's the rest of it? It's so small. It's tiny. And honestly, at the end of the day, for this kind of radio, this is not the kind of radio where I'm going to go pull up in my truck and operate from my vehicle, right? Or 10 feet from my vehicle usually, although I have. This is the kind of radio that's going in my pack and getting carried way into the woods or way up a summit. And if I'm hiking 5 miles into the woods or I'm climbing up a mountain, this radio weighs half as much as this radio does, and it's way smaller. So for the use case for this particular style of radio, for me, this is better just because it's smaller and lighter. And it does everything this radio does except for 80 meters, and it doesn't have the SWR meter and the power meter, which I don't really necessarily need because I know the antennas I'm running with this are resonant. Right? I'm running an end-fed half wave, or I'm running a dipole. I know they're resonant antennas. I'm not worried about my SWR, realistically. And at the end of the day, this thing being so small and so light, as much as I love this radio and I love the feature set of this radio, this does just about everything that does, and it's so much smaller and it's so much lighter. Now, like I said, if you want one of these, you're going to have to scour the internet and pray that you find one for sale and you can snatch it up before somebody else does. They are very, very hard to get. This was harder to get than my KX1 was, and that was a hard radio to get. These things are rare as hen's teeth. I'm hoping LNR they follow through with that and make the 40-20-15 version of that, because I would definitely buy one of those. I think that's probably more useful than 80-40-30-20. Like I said, 80 meters. Now, maybe when we get to the bottom of the solar cycle and the bands aren't as good and some of those low bands are working better, okay, maybe then I can see this radio. But right now, we're at the peak of the solar cycle. Give me some radios that have got some higher bands. Give me some 15. Give me some 10 meters. All right. But if I'm looking at just these lower bands, at the end of the day, it's got to be that radio. It's so small. It's so light. It has 90% of the features the other radio does. And there's just something cool about this little rig. So the next video, we're going to look at this radio will be up against my last QRP CW radio. You can probably figure out what that is because I've already mentioned it in this video and you've seen it in other videos of mine. So the next video, we'll look at those two radios and we'll see between this and that, which one I'm going to pick. And that's going to be a hard decision for very different reasons. So with that being said, hopefully you got a little information out of this. And I know this one's probably information only because the chances of you buying one of these is pretty low. But if you can get your hands on one and you're like, if you're just sort of somebody who's going to dabble in CW, you probably don't want to buy one of these. But if you're serious about it, you're going out and doing activations and you're serious about it, get yourself one of these things. It's a phenomenal little radio. So everybody, with that being said, this one's a lot shorter than the last one was, but again, these radios are so similar, I don't need to rehash all of the different functions. If you want to see all of the different direct frequency entry and all that other stuff, go watch the video of this radio versus the SW3B, and you'll see how all those functions work. The direct frequency entry, the SWR meter, the power meter, all of those things that I made the feature set of this radio so good. If you want to see how those all work, watch that video and understand that this radio works exactly the same. The only difference is it doesn't have that SWR meter or power meter. So everybody, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you found it informative. And like I said, the next one's going to be tough too. So thank you so much for watching. Until the next one, 7-3.